It's a pleasure to see all of you this evening at the third and final public meeting for the School Options Committee that has been looking at the review of Maple Ridge Elementary, Shubenacadie District Elementary School with consideration of Winding River Consolidated as a potential receiving school. My name is Carla Engelhart, and I am the facilitator that the superintendent appointed to support the committee with their work. We are really pleased to see you all here today, and as I mentioned, we are live streaming the event, so that people who are not able to be here this evening can join us either this evening as we're meeting, or they can follow up afterwards. The recommendation for a live stream actually came from our first public meeting, and it was a brilliant suggestion, which we were really pleased to see in the second meeting. We had 50 people joining us during the meeting through live stream, and over 300 people actually viewed it after the event. So thank you for the recommendation from that first public meeting, and thank you to the IT support for making it possible. So with the live stream, of course, you know that you are being recorded if you do speak during the meeting. I just wanted to make sure you're aware of that. And just for the purpose of minutes, we also have audio recorders which are just capturing the essence of some of the discussion for the purpose of the minutes. Those audio tapes are destroyed after the minutes are produced. And of course, all of our minutes from the public meetings and our working meetings have been online as well and will continue to be so if you wish to refer to those. So to get started, and I actually left my little device over by the machine to advance it. Carrie, can I trouble you to gather that? And while Carrie does that, this is our chair, Carrie Robson. I'm going to introduce the committee. Thank you very much. As I age, it gets much more interesting how much I remember and how much I forget. So we're going to start with introductions, and then I will provide, I apologize to those of you who have been at all of these meetings, the background, which is the rationale for the review, the process, some of the objectives, and the considerations as well. We're also going to talk about the options just briefly that were presented at meeting 2 for good discussion. We had some great feedback, and what the committee has done since that second meeting. And then we're going to be, of course, tonight, I'm sure you're all eager to hear the draft recommendation that the committee has brought to you for your input and feedback. And then we'll talk about the next steps when we all dispatch this evening. So getting started, I've just introduced our chair, Carrie Robson. Next to her is Norval Mitchell. Do you want to stand up and just turn around and say hello? Oh, some of you are not going to be happy with me about that. Norval Mitchell, who is a member of the community. Michelle Laverty, Cindy White, John A. McDonald, and Lori Malcolm. And not with us here present, but on the live stream is Chris McPhee, one of our members who travels a lot with work, and so he's joining us this evening by live stream. So hello, Chris, hope you're safe. And down at the back of the room there, we have Courtney Hicks, and she is our recording secretary. And as I mentioned, she will be audio taping, but also taking notes through the session. If any of you need a washroom during the session, there are some over in the corner there and then down the hall as well. I also wanted to indicate that we've got some other guests in the room this evening. And it was a request in the second meeting that members of the school board be available to respond to a Q&A. That request was put forward, and there are a number of people from the school board that are here tonight. However, they're here as observers, so I would ask you to respect that they want to hear your feedback and your input. However, they won't be responding to questions this evening, but I'm very pleased that they've been able to join us. We have Superintendent Gary Adams, Dr. Chris Bolter, Trish McKinnon, Allison McGraw, and did I miss anybody staff-wise? We also have from the board, did I miss anyone? Thank you, and I apologize for that, Stephanie Eisner-Ryan. We have the board chair, that is Trudy Thompson. We also have Vivian Farrell and Scott Adamson. And Wendy, has Wendy arrived? Okay, hi Wendy. We have Wendy Matheson-Withrow as well. Did I miss anybody from the board? Okay, welcome and thank you very much for being here. I think it is important to hear the discussion that is going to take place this evening. So moving right along, whoops, there we go. I did want to, again, frame some of the discussions that the committee has been having. When they started out this work, and as you're aware, they're all volunteers and they're members of the community, and a number of them have got children in the schools. And they've undertaken a very significant task. And one of the first things that they've decided to do, or that they decided to do, was to really talk about some of the underpinnings of the work together. And they wanted to talk about the values that would drive their actions and ultimately how they would arrive at the recommendation for the board to consider. They were respect and accountability to one another for the process that had been laid out, as well as to respect the diversity and the perspectives of the community. And there's been an awful lot of effort to hear from the community and consider those different perspectives. And also a commitment and accountability to the community. And of course, we've done everything we can to make sure that you're aware of what the committee has been doing and have posted minutes of those meetings so that you've been able to access them. And we've also had a Gmail account set up so that we could hear from you. And questions that have been posed in the meetings have also been responded to in a public forum as well. They've worked extremely well together. Even though they may have different perspectives, they've worked together to come up with the best recommendation possible. And of course, communication within themselves and with the community and transparency has really been one of the hallmarks of the way that they've done their work. So just to give you a perspective about why this had to happen, this is a provincially driven process. And of course, it was triggered by the fact that the P3 lease at Maple Ridge Elementary School was approaching the expiry date, and a decision needed to be made about whether or not to purchase the school, continue to lease the school, or walk away from the school. And of course, there was evidence that there was a decline in enrollment, 17.8% over the past 10 years. And overall in CCRSB, enrollment has declined. So you can see the significant numbers there. And there were projections that there would be a further decline as well by 2025. The declining enrollment at Maple Ridge has resulted in substantially lower utilization of the building space. And we also talked at the last meeting about school optimization, and that the organization, or the school board, is really moving toward optimization, which requires a substantive number of students in order to have the right mix of teachers and students. So some of the policy, we talked in a little bit more detail. I'm just going to keep it fairly high level this evening. For some of you, you've heard this many times. The policy requires that all of the schools that are in the area that could be impacted should be considered, and that the committee needed to look at potentially expanding the range of options for consideration. So Maple Ridge, of course, because of the lease coming due, and Shubenacadie District Elementary were being reviewed with consideration for closure of one of those schools. Winding River Consolidated School was being considered as potentially a receiving school, not for closure. And we know that the reason that Shubenacadie was included in that was Shubenacadie's utilization is at 37%, and the enrollment has had a significant decline over the past 10 years. So this is the process. The committee actually started their work in November and have now had 2 public meetings prior to this evening and had numerous working meetings. The committee has been extremely dedicated and have worked on holidays and snow days and all of the rest of it to try to gather the information and evidence in order to be able to formulate a good recommendation. We're down at this public meeting number 3 here, and the next couple of steps are that following this evening, of course, the committee is going to go away and do more work after hearing your feedback and input. And then they need to, moving over to the left-hand side there, prepare a report and recommendation that is submitted in writing to the school board for consideration, and the date for that is March 13th. So it's a fairly ambitious timeline. And then a staff technical report will be prepared. And then there's some tentative dates down here where the school board will actually receive a presentation with the report and the recommendation and the technical report. The date that you see there tentatively stated is April 26th. It's tentative in that it actually may be considered for moving up to a date more swiftly. It's nice background music. And ultimately, May 17th, no problem. May 17th is when the board is slated to make the decision, and as I mentioned, that also may be moved up. And part of that is because of, based on the recommendations, there may be some implications in terms of budget planning, staffing, et cetera, and so the board needs to have the opportunity to deal with some of that information sooner than originally intended. So the objectives of the process, through a reorganization of the schools, to optimize the provision of educational services. That's really the intention, to make sure that the students are getting the best experience possible, and that's based on what is best in leading practice. So the review needed to ensure that the school that was under consideration, so the focus initially on Maple Ridge and the lease, and then of course involving Shubenacadie, is that it looks at the broader school region, and it also considers the parents and the communities and gets them engaged in the process. Clear and rigorous information is used to make the recommendations. This committee has been very intent from the very first meeting on having really solid evidence, and they have validated information as it's come to them and questioned information and gone back for more information. So they've been very hungry to get good evidence upon which to base their decisions. They've always tried to make sure that they're available to you, to the rest of the community, so that you know the work that they're doing and can be engaged in that. And ultimately, they want to be able to provide good evidence to the school board for consideration along with the recommendation. So they did consider a number of possibilities and were very innovative in their thinking. Those of you that attended the second meeting know that they looked at fairly closely at 8 different recommendations. And by the time we went to meeting 2, we had in-depth discussion with members of the community around 3 of those options and got some great feedback for consideration. And of course, the intention is to move away from status quo toward optimization. So the committee has, I've mentioned a number of these things, but they looked at the existing policies, both the CCRSB and provincial policies, the community input, student enrollment, access to and equity of programming, the maximizing the use of the school facilities, always making best use of financial resources, human resources, et cetera. And also looked at things that might be limiting factors such as transportation, geographically isolated schools, et cetera. The work that the committee has done since you last came together was they went away and really did a deep dive on some of the information that came up from the second meeting and the feedback. For those of you that weren't present, after some general information, we broke up into 3 different groups so that we had smaller groups, and everyone that was participating had a chance to weigh in on all of the 3 options and provide their suggestions, their feedback. Did that work? Didn't it work? What were the pros? What were the cons? And what are the suggestions for the committee? So that's where the committee started, and then they dived in for more information. So looked at the additional data that they had, and they also had some additional presentations to help inform their recommendation this evening. I think in a minute Carrie's going to talk about what some of those were specifically. So I think I'm just actually going to turn it over to you, and you can talk a little bit about some of the presentations and information that's come our way. Norval just reminded me that I forgot to mention some of our other guests that are in the room. Thank you, Norval. We have municipal and town councillors present. We've got Stephen King, Eldon Hebb, Pam McGinnis, Keith Rhino, Cecil Dixon, and did anybody else come in that I missed? Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, Carrie.
So as Carla said, and I think probably most of you know, I'm Carrie Robson. I'm the chair of this committee. We'll see how well I do with this. So I'll keep moving away from this, and if you can't hear me, just remind me. I'll pick up where Carla left off and go over the presentations we've heard since the last time we met as a public meeting. So we've been fairly busy. We've had a lot of presentations, and they're outlined here. We've met with Randy Ellis, and he came in to discuss busing and busing routes with us. Herb Steve, who's the Director of Operational Services at CCRSB, and also we've heard from Dr. Chris Bolter, and we've heard from Dr. Bolter now twice, but this time we had a number of questions for him about the French immersion program. We also heard from Stacey Ingraham, who is the president of the East Hants Chamber of Commerce, who was able to provide us with a survey from the chamber members, outlining some of the business community's views on this process in general. We also were able to look to the 2016 census data. Now that's not entirely out, but what's been released so far we've been able to go through. We also heard from Paul Mumbercat on behalf of the Penny Group. And as well, we're able to review, or at least review in part, the corridor traffic study, which is the study with respect to the Lance interchange that has been the topic of much discussion. So we've spent our meeting time going over a number of those either those reports or hearing from a number of people, which has been immensely helpful as we work towards our recommendation. So I'm going to put these all up. There we go. as we told you last time, we brainstormed a number of potential options. They're outlined there. We went through them the last time we met as a public group and explained why some of them simply weren't feasible, and essentially came down to 3 remaining options, which were close the Maple Ridge School, close the Shubenacadie School, or our catchment area review. And so number 5 up there, which was a change of the catchment areas. Those were the ones that we discussed at our public meeting in our small breakout groups last time. I'm getting way ahead. I'm really good with PowerPoint. So which brought us to our draft recommendation. So the last public meeting was incredibly helpful. A lot of really useful information came from that, not only presented at that meeting, but also gave us a number of people to touch base with and receive more information from. As a result of that and a result of the information we've been able to hear over the last number of months, we have come to a draft recommendation. So the first step of our draft recommendation is we are recommending to the school board to purchase the Maple Ridge Elementary School, also to continue to operate the Shubenacadie District Elementary School. And the third part of that, and this is in an effort to move towards optimization, is to conduct a review of the catchment areas, and that would be from the schools all the way from Infield to the Winding River School. Now, it was brought to our attention at the last public meeting that technically Infield and Elmsdale District Elementary Schools were not part of this review, and that is true. One of the downsides of that is the parents and community members in those communities have not really been called upon. And so therefore, with the third part of our recommendation, we have, through this process, had enough information that we believe that the school board can move to optimization, can move to better use of facilities by reviewing the catchment areas. But because the Elmsdale and Infield schools weren't specifically targeted in this review, we aren't able to give an exact recommendation. Our review is simply that the school board should look to review the catchment areas and move towards optimization. So the rationale, and we've broken this down into a couple of big categories, and I'm just going to touch on each of the 4 big categories that our rationale falls under. The first part of our rationale is with respect to the Maple Ridge Elementary School. One of the questions that came forward in our last public meeting is why not extend the lease, give more time? Ultimately, the extension of the lease on that building simply doesn't make economic sense. There's an Auditor General's report out, the recommendations that we've reviewed. It is not a viable economic decision to continue the lease, and essentially what would happen is you would pay as much in the lease extension as you would to buy the school at the current time. So currently it's a set buyout option, and so it simply doesn't make sense to extend that any longer. The next piece of our rationales is that we've come to the conclusion that we'll be putting forward to the school board is that both schools are required, given the evidence that we have of growth in this area. I can't remember how we've entirely done these slides, so okay, there we go. I couldn't remember if we put all the information up on the slide or not, but we have. So evidence of growth in the area. As we said, we've heard from a number of different sources. One of the sources we have heard from is a representative from the Penny Group, which is a group that owns a large tract of land in Lance that is slated for development. So as the slide says, currently they are in the process of developing phase 1. They are looking at starting that the summer of 2018, which will include 200 semis and a minimum of 4 8-unit apartments. It has already been approved as a right, which means there's not a need for public consultation, there's not a need of public hearing. That development can go forward. And also fairly important to our committee was it is not contingent on the Lance interchange. So that development is moving forward. We've been advised by the Penny Group and certainly was a big part of our recommendation. Again, the Penny Group has advised us that that development is looking to move towards or target affordable housing for young families and seniors. And we've done a little bit of our own math here, but if we said even half of that development moved towards young families, and if those families even had 1 child each, and so we've actually had some committee members who were able to pull out some numbers and tells us the average is 1.4 children per household, but we round it down to 1. And we said that's an additional 200 children going into the Maple Ridge Elementary School. What we know about the current enrollment at the Maple Ridge Elementary School is 200 more children would put that school beyond capacity. As well, we also, in our evidence of growth, were able to review the CBCL's traffic study. And so that is the traffic study on the Lance interchange. and it is based on the planned developments along Trunk 2, which is the main road going through lands, which are the large tracts of land that Clayton Development or Shaw Group currently owns, Armco owns, and other as described in the study, and we know at least one of the others is the Penny Group, who is currently in the phase of developing. Our additional information considered, so in keeping with that evidence of growth, we do know, and we've been able to pull and get some, I guess, confirmed property information that Armco and Shaw Group both have large tracts of land in the Maple Ridge catchment area that are slated, or that are available for potential future development. When the interchange comes into place, as we've been advised, it's expected the population in the area will increase. And when we take into that increase in population, as I've said, looking at the Penny Group alone, you know, based on our rough math, that could put Maple Ridge over capacity alone. When we look at that, what we have come to the conclusion of is that the way to optimize schools within this area is to look at that change in catchment areas. By changing the catchment areas, you could look at a redistribution of the children between the 5 elementary schools in the area, so that you could optimize both use of the school board's dollars, but also educational services across the entire corridor area, rather than just the Maple Ridge Shubenacadie schools. I got through that way quicker than I expected. So what we'd like to hear, though, is that's where we're at with the draft recommendation. As we said, it's simply a draft. We are here tonight because we would like to hear from you. We'd like to hear from you what you have that could help us add to that draft, what you have, if you have, that could challenge that draft, so that we can really address all of the different angles. And as well, I'm just going to take the moment to say that draft, again, our recommendation to the school board is just that. It is a recommendation. But the stronger our recommendation can be and the more supported our recommendation can be, obviously, one would hope the more weight it will have with the school board. And so we're looking to community input at this point in time. And Carla is holding up a sign because I said, I'll forget to say this, so please remind me. And sure enough, I did. And the last piece, which was a little bit too late to get on the slides, but has been provided, and I did want to mention here tonight, is, as most of you are likely aware, there has been a Save Our Schools group that has been organized and working in this area. They were able to provide us with a copy of the petition tonight. They have 2,258 names on that petition to save both schools at this point in time. All right, there we go, plus another 34. So I won't even try to do that math. So we wanted to let the public know that we do have a copy of that. Our intention would be, because part of our mandate was to bring forward the community input. I think that's a really important part of the community input. So we will be attaching the petition to our recommendation so the school board is aware of it. I understand they've also provided a copy to the school board, but I think it's important as well that it goes forward in our recommendation. So we've got a mic in the middle of the room. I'm going to hand things back to Carla to facilitate some conversation.
Yeah, don't go too far. So the first meeting, we had an awful lot of people who wanted to weigh in, and not everybody got a chance. So I'm just going to ask that if you do step forward and make a comment, and it's been acknowledged, to please give other people an opportunity as well. So I would welcome anyone to approach the microphone with any questions, comments, feedback. This is important because this is a draft recommendation, as Carrie had stated, and so we need to know how you feel about that. Okay, this is a first. Please.
Well, I'm actually quite pleased with the recommendation you guys have come up with. We've said all along that it seems a little short-sighted with what's coming through the community, and just using the projection numbers from an old census didn't make sense at all. So to see these recommendations is very pleasing. Also wanted to say thanks to everybody that worked on the petitions and everybody's hard work with that. Hopefully that'll hold some weight with your recommendation put forth, and I'd like to see a little more involvement with our local MLA and trying to convince her own government to make the purchase of this property, because I think that's what's holding this all up. It seems to me other MLAs can get schools purchased even without a school board recommendation, so I don't see why this one should be so hard. But again, just very pleased with it, and thank you very much for all your time and effort with this, guys. It means a lot for our communities, so thanks a lot.
Thank you. I appreciate your comment, and I'm sure the committee does. I just wanted to add that, especially following the first meeting, the committee really went to a great deal of detail trying to gather additional information, so they weren't simply looking at old census data, but and the school board was very helpful in terms of trying to provide us with a continual supply of information, and also some additional information that they did. So they worked very hard to try to supply us with that information as well. So I'm grateful for that.
My name's Steve King, and I attended all three meetings, from the first one in Stewiacke, the one in Lance, and the one here, and also the one that the community held itself. And it's just come, I would say, almost 180 degrees. I remember the first meeting on the 1st of December in Stewiacke, and it was a rugged meeting, to say the least. And people, you know, this was very close to their heart, very close to the community. And they made it very, very clear how important this was. And I believe you folks listened and took a lot of notes regarding that. The second session that happened in Lance, the crowd grew by 300%. We went from 100 people to, I think, a little over 300 people. And I have to applaud you to, you know, keeping things under wrap. I thought we might have had a riot that night after, based on what I saw in Stewiacke, but it was well handled. Really, really pleased with those folks that between that meeting in Lance and this meeting that provided a lot of information, some of the studies, some of the development that will take place, and it certainly seems that was the information that made such a huge difference. And just in final comment, just want to thank you guys. You did a great job keeping it organized, because after the first meeting in Stewiacke, I thought, uh-oh. Thanks very much, and I'm really pleased to see the recommendation.
Thank you, committee.
Hi, everybody. I'm so happy I could almost cry. When you said to keep both schools open, that's what everybody in this room has been fighting to do. We've had petitions in businesses. We've had letters from farmers, from homeowners, from business owners. Everyone in this room understands that we need both schools. And I think that the committee understood that going in, but needed to be able to present it. And I think they're presenting it in a logical fashion. If Maple Ridge is bursting at the seams, we welcome you. So Shubenacadie is going to, if the catchment areas are changing, Shubenacadie will be optimized. And one of the things that's going to happen is more people will come to our community. I was rereading the Ivany report tonight because it's kind of long. And in the very beginning of it, you don't have to go far. Before they say, one of the really big things we need to do is optimize our rural areas. And that's where we are here. We're a farming community, we're a lumber community, and we're also an outdoor rural community. And we're a community that is trying to draw people in to benefit from what we have. And one of the things that we need to have is a school. So I thank you for all your work, and I applaud the outcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Your comment reminded me that in the presentation received by the Chamber of Commerce, they had actually conducted a survey of their members, which many of you are probably aware of, and it will certainly be included in the information that goes forward with the report. And business owners were very concerned about the ability to attract and retain businesses and good employees in the area if, in fact, there was going to be a closure of a school. So that was important information as well for the committee to consider. Committee members, do you have anything that we've missed that you want to add? I don't think I've ever seen John without words. Go ahead.
My name's Paul Mombercat. I used to do quite a bit of development in East Hants. I say used to because I've since sold most of my land. However, I do have quite an insight on what's going to be happening as far as future development in the area and how it's going to come about. Everybody seems to be waiting for the interchange, and back, I think it was in 2008, DOT actually purchased land and removed buildings, and the large landholders at the time, which was Armco and Clayton Developments, devised plans based on that the interchange was coming, and myself, I had a large chunk of land, which had over 2,000 lots between the three. And what has happened and has held it off, was the interchange, whichever location it goes to, makes a big change in plans to each developer. So no one could really start anything until they knew where the interchange was going, because they could start developing wrong. Now, it's been quite a while, and we're still waiting. Penny Group has purchased land from myself. It doesn't matter to them when the interchange comes. We're starting now, and have already started the process in Lance to get approval to do development. And when I say approval, it's engineering approval, and because the land is already zoned for what they want to do, which is build small apartment units and R2 semis, with some single family also. They've also owned land in Enfield, which could have an effect. It's not right now, it's not in what we're talking about here, but there's 68 semi-units going in Enfield, which could impact the Enfield school, and maybe this goes towards your optimization of where people will have to be moved. The land stuff is, the projected date is 2018 of getting a start on the lots. What we're hoping for is a 10-year build out of 200 lots, which is 400 units, and within that time frame, the interchange will probably be here. I'd say probably because 8 years ago we thought it'd be here now. But when it does come, if you look at any other place where an interchange has happened, there's been an explosion of population, of commercial activities. One of the managers from Penny Group was out in I guess it's a conference out in BC, and he mentioned to me that he was surprised at the interest in the Lance interchange, even out there, because he met with people from Sobeys, from Irving, and what happens as soon as you get a new interchange, then there's gas stations and stuff like that. That development in Lance along the interchange will all be planned development. There'll be like large apartment buildings. It will be the go-to place. They will be coming right down, and you just zip off and you're right into the subdivisions. The population growth, when the interchange comes, will just explode like it has in any other place. Lance has a big advantage over anywhere else in Halifax or the surrounding areas like Hammonds Plains or Bedford Sackville. All those places are all full now. You have to develop on rock. Lance, we're fortunate. We've got some of the best building clays in the world, and it's much cheaper to develop. House sizes have gotten much smaller. They will be smaller in the future. It's going to be seniors and young families. And price is going to be a very important aspect, which will give Lance quite an advantage over anywhere else. So I guess what I'm saying is that it wouldn't be very, you have to look at the long-term plan, and it wouldn't be very prudent in my mind to close a school when you know the development is coming, and it's not potential, it's not pie in the sky, it's close, it's there. Some of it is coming now. It wouldn't be very prudent to do that when you've got a building that you're going to buy for $4.5 million, if that's the correct figure. That seems awful cheap to me. You couldn't replace it. The optimization plan that you presented there seems like the perfect plan, because Lance will not hold all the development. Lance, Enfield, Elmsdale will not hold it eventually.
Right.
And, you know, in 10 years' time, I'm certain that it'll be coming this way. The school's still here, that it's big enough, you know, to take that overflow and that redistribution you're talking about, because it won't take very long before Lance fills up. And I'm all for, you know, sizing things down and being as efficient as you can, and trying to save money. And because I realize I have 7 children, and none of them go to Maple Ridge right now. So they do right now. I have one more year left, then they're out of there. So I really have no stake in Maple Ridge myself personally, but as far as a community value, like the gymnasium's there, and I shouldn't say a stake, but you know, personally, my kids won't be affected. My kids won't be affected. But I lost my train of thought here.
While you're getting your caboose hooked back up, then your train of thought, if I, at the risk of putting you on the spot, my understanding is that you had made an offer that if the school board was interested in actually having a conversation with you about some of the developments that are planned,
yes,
that you'd be willing to do that. Is that correct?
Yes, I would give a presentation. I have the plans from the whole overall. Well, I guess the municipality has all the plans too of those overalls, because back in 2008, there was a big meeting at, trying to remember if it was at the school, it might have been at Maple Ridge where they had it, but it went over the plans for the development of all, like Armco's and Clayton's and myself. There was a lot of talk about the trails and stuff like that. So that stuff is public record, and those plans are there. Yeah. Yeah, it might be short term. It might cost a little more to hold the schools, but long term, I'm sure that it'll be the best investment decision. And I don't know. I'm open to questions to anybody like on that end. And I'd like to do a presentation to the board. And I realize I stood up here because there's some members here from the board, and I think that's the most important thing, is that the development is going to be coming, and to make a quick decision that you might be kicking yourself later on.
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Your remarks reminded me that included as well in the report that goes with the recommendations to the school board will be a number. There were many, many letters that came through this, the email address. Members of the community, groups, sports groups, et cetera, that are using facilities and had really indicated how important the schools were to them. So those things will be included as well as part of the package. Go ahead.
Yes, I'm a member of the community. I want to speak from the heart. I live very close to the school, so I hear the children playing. I'm asking you not to take their voices away from this community. We have lost so much in our community. If we lose our school, we've lost our heart and our soul. And there's no way that you guys can sleep at night if you do that to us.
Thank you. Okay.
Good day. My name is Wendell Tingley. I know my dad was a counselor here for many years, and I represented Lance. But I have a question, maybe to the panel, and maybe the school board will answer this tonight. Because I think at the last meeting, the question was, you could not recommend closing or keeping both of them open. And that was not within the parameters of this committee that the school board had set out. Okay. Now, I think that they should keep both schools open, but if they can't keep them open, and that recommendation, I would like the committee to address that question, because the last meeting I was at, I believe it was raised that was not even on the table. So I applaud the committee for making that recommendation, but I would like the question.
And I think that's an important question, because in the first meeting we did have, a lot of the discussion centered around what the mandate for this committee was. And what the mandate was is the school board brought to us and said that the status quo cannot remain. They had given us 2 options, which was to close one of the schools or the other school. Had also left it open, though, to recommend any other option that was not status quo, that was a move towards optimization. And so with respect to our recommendation, and that's why the change of the catchment area and the development of lands is so very important, is because as that development begins and continues, that it will make it, in our view, what will likely become a necessity is to change that catchment area to move children within the schools and move the catchment areas within this, within the entire corridor and Winding River. And so our position is, by having that catchment review, it is not the status quo. We are not recommended that the status quo, and specifically in our mandate, we were mandated to look at such issues as busing districts and catchment areas. In reviewing those catchment areas, it became abundantly clear to us is that that is what we view as the solution to this issue. And so by moving the catchment areas, by shifting those around, it moves this school board, it moves this area for this school board towards optimization. And it is not a status quo of what we are seeing right now. It is a move towards optimization, which is the goal of the school board. And as well, it's going to become a necessity, and as we see with the reality of the development of lands. So it's twofold. The school board, in our opinion, cannot sacrifice good financial decision making simply to achieve optimization in the short term. What they need to do is look long term, make good financial decisions, while also moving towards optimization, and we believe our recommendation does that.
I applaud you on that recommendation, but I'd be interested, we have school board members here tonight. What is your view on that? Now, I'll put them on the spot. I mean, they're here.
Yeah,
they're elected.
This is the point at which I'm actually going to step in, because they have explicitly stated that they're here to observe so that they can hear the concerns, and they'll take that away for consideration. However, I did make the commitment to them that they would not be asked to respond to questions at this time.
I applaud that. But I look at it, they are elected by the people, and they should be held accountable to the people.
Yeah.
Right? So if a person wants to ask the question, why will they not answer the questions? Now, I know I wasn't at the first meeting. I know it got pretty rowdy. But I do believe that there is nothing wrong with a person that is elected by the people in this room that they will not answer a question.
And I wouldn't suggest that there's not a willingness to respond to questions, but it's in due time after they had an opportunity to consider the things that have been laid before them. Like you, they're hearing the recommendations this evening for the very first time, and so it is reasonable to expect that they need some time to consider that. When the recommendations are presented, there is a public meeting, and so there may be an opportunity for questions at that time. I can't make that commitment, but that's a potential opportunity. And as well, if you've got concerns you want us to bring forward, the committee to bring forward, please feel free to send those to us.
If I may throw it in there, like I said tonight to one of the board members, if they are not going to, they're going to close it or whatever, and they don't go with these recommendations, what is the option? I know the MLA is not here tonight. I don't see Margaret here. What is the option if the schools are not bought and funded by the parents on the ground? Is that another option? Because there's money given. I know other provinces do it. They're privately funded or run by private, but it's also taxpayers' money is put into it in the long run. I know it's going to be developed. We know, Lance, thank Paul for saying that, it's going to be developed, and it is going to be a spin-off, 10 years, maybe 10 years down the road, 5 years down the road. And it is short-sighted to take the view to close it down. But the reality is there's money out there on the table today, and it's the government that has to fund it. And the school board, I assume, is in this predicament because they're being mandated by the provincial government, right? So it is a political.
Yeah, and I think we can speak to that because it's one of the questions we had asked in our review of how that came to be and what had happened, where the school board was called upon to advise the government whether or not the P3 schools in this area, which were Enfield and Riverside and Maple Ridge, were deemed necessary by the school board. Because of population and utilization rates, they were able to answer that Riverview and or Riverside and Enfield were necessary. They were not able to give as short of an answer with respect to Maple Ridge, and so that's what's triggered this review, is that to give the school board the ability to answer to the government whether or not Maple Ridge is a necessary P3 school. Our understanding based on it, and this is what we've been advised, is if the board does say it is a necessary school, then it would be purchased by the province.
I want to thank all the committee, though, for all the hard work they've done. And I think it's appreciated by everybody in all the communities for the work they've done. And we'll hope the school board will take it under consideration when they make that decision, because I will be lobbying all levels of government.
I'm not seeing anyone else come forward with comments, so I'm going to move us on just to what happens next after this evening. The plan, of course, is for the committee to meet on Monday night, as we always do, and there will be a discussion about the feedback and input that we've heard from you this evening, as well as additional information that has come our way. We still have feelers out for some more and requests out there for more information and input, which we'll continue to invite that and consider that while we're preparing the report. And as you saw, the report needs to be prepared in writing by March 13th. So we're looking for all of that information to be in and considered at that time. The committee is going to be required to finalize their recommendation by that date, and then the physical presentation will be a little following that. And ultimately, there will be a meeting where the committee presents the recommendations to the board. So those are the next steps, and again, if you've got additional information you want to send, we will continue to check that email address until such time as we've got that report off. So April 26th was the tentative date, and as I mentioned, that may be moved forward. We really do, the committee and myself, Courtney, we really appreciate the fact that you've come out, that you've been vocal, that you've shared with us your concerns and your ideas. I think the committee really benefited from some of your recommendations, and it's your community, these are your schools, and we know how important it is to you. That was very evident from the first meeting and continues to be this evening. So we really want to thank you for your input. I want to thank the people that have joined us on live stream as well, and have a good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming out.